And now it's time for Madison's Mad Facts with your host, Madison Standish.
Hey everybody, it's Madison. Welcome to another Madison on the Air bonus feature of Madison's Mad Facts, where we look at the way things were in real life back during these old-timey radio shows. In our most recent episode, Tales of the Texas Rangers, I got to be a sheriff, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, it was super rare to have a female sheriff, but it wasn't unheard of. So in this episode of Madison's Mad Facts, we're going through a brief history of female law enforcement officers. Now, the path to women in these roles is different throughout the world, so we're going to just stay focused at home here in the U.S. With us to talk cop shop is the voice of our Harriet in Tales of the Texas Rangers, Sharon Grünwald. Hi, Sharon. Sup?
Hey, Madison. Good to be back with you.
So, Sharon, the opener of Tales of the Texas Rangers says that they are the most famous and oldest law enforcement body in North America. Let's start there.
Well, we might give them the most famous title, especially with Hollywood featuring the Texas Rangers so often. But no, they're not the oldest. Technically, the oldest law enforcement department in the United States is the Philadelphia Police Department. They were founded in 1751, which makes sense since Philadelphia was the capital before the Revolutionary War.
And Texas wasn't even a thing yet.
Right. Then, on a federal level, the U.S. Marshal Service was formed in 1789. The Texas Rangers wouldn't be founded until 1823.
Okay, so that's out of the way. Let's look at the first women to serve as police officers.
Okay, so let's put it in perspective. The Philadelphia Police were formed 25 years before the United States became a country, and the Texas Rangers were founded nearly 40 years before the Civil War. The first female police officer wouldn't be sworn in until 1890.
So 140 years after the first police in the U.S.
Exactly. She was Marie Owens and became a policewoman in Chicago. Prior to joining the police force, Marie worked for the City Health Department of Chicago as a factory inspector. It was her job to enforce child labor and education laws. At the time in history, very young children were being sent to work in those dangerous factories to support their families. Marie once reported finding scores of children as young as 7 working in the factories. She fought to enforce the working age of 14 and to see that children were attending school. Unfortunately, the health department didn't have much authority, so Marie Owens joined the Chicago Police Department. That gave her the power to arrest offenders and enforce the law. As with many of the early female police officers, Marie Owens' duties were to protect women and children, and she was quoted as saying, "In my 16 years of experience, I have come across more suffering than ever is seen by any man detective."
Ick. This is the 1800 Chicago from Upton Sinclair's novel, The Jungle.
Yep. He paints a very thorough picture of factory life at that time. It's also worth mentioning that the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was founded in 1866 and wasn't only about protecting animals back then. They also had a branch to protect women and children, so clearly this was a major concern. Female officers were employed to handle these cases because, well, it was believed they could be more sensitive to the needs of women and children.
Now, I was a sheriff in our episode of Tales of the Texas Rangers. How are they different than police officers?
The most simple difference is that police officers enforce the law in their designated cities or townships, but a sheriff's jurisdiction is across an entire county. However, there are certain towns which don't have their own designated police force, and they use the county sheriff's office as their only law enforcement body. One very distinct and unique difference is a police chief is appointed, but a sheriff is elected by the local citizens. In most cases, the requirement of an election is actually written into the county constitution. And while there are differing opinions on whether elections for the position of sheriff are a good idea or not, it is still a standard practice across the United States.
When did we get our first female sheriff?
Technically, the first female sheriff was Emma Doherty. Her husband was former Texas Ranger John R. Bannister, who became the elected sheriff of Coleman County, Texas. Unfortunately, Sheriff Bannister died of a stroke in 1918. Emma had been serving as his deputy sheriff at the time of his death. With the election cycle coming up in a short time, Emma was asked to step into the role of sheriff of Coleman County. While her taking over the post created headlines across the country, painting her as a fearless six-shooter matron, in reality, Emma never sought recognition for her short appointment. After that, it would take 27 years for Texas to actually elect their first female sheriff.
So we've been talking specifically about sheriffs. What about the Texas Rangers? Kind of a boys' club, I'm imagining?
Well, yeah. So where police enforce the law in their own cities and sheriff's jurisdictions are their entire county, Texas Rangers are what's referred to in other states as state police or state troopers. These officers have jurisdiction over the entire state, although they're usually assigned a specific region. Well, each state has its own version of this. And yes, the Texas Rangers are the earliest formed state law enforcement agency in the U.S. Well-known Texas historian T.R. Fehrenbach described a typical Texas Ranger in his book Lone Star. He said, "The image was that of a tall, quiet-spoken Westerner who preferred his horse to female society."
Prefers his horse to female society? OMG! That totes sounds like our Texas Ranger, Ranger Pearson.
Exactly. Oh, Hollywood loved to indulge the trope of the Marlboro Man as a Texas Ranger. And with the radio show and the TV series that followed running in the 1950s, Ranger Pearson fit the bill.
So when did we get the first female Texas Ranger?
You're not gonna like it. While the Texas Rangers were formed in 1823, the first female ranger wasn't sworn in until 1993.
1993? Holy crap! That's literally the year Walker Texas Ranger came out.
At the time, the Texas governor was Ann Richards. While the two female rangers who were promoted absolutely passed the rigorous screening to receive their appointments, in the early 90s, the female governor was notably pushing for more minorities to be hired among the Texas Rangers. 1988 saw the first African-American ranger, after a complaint was filed by the NAACP. And then, in 1993, 2 female rangers joined the ranks. However, it wouldn't be until 2020, just 2 years ago, that the first female Texas Rangers were actually promoted to captain.
That is full-on cray.
Now, the last agency we should mention here are the U.S. Marshals.
Ooh, like Marshal Dillon in Gunsmoke.
Right. Well, the jurisdiction of the U.S. Marshal's office is the entire country. They can cross state lines, even though, like the state police, they're usually assigned a particular region. Do you remember I mentioned earlier that the U.S. Marshal Service was formed as far back as 1789? Well, they appointed their first female marshal in 1949. Catherine Battle Gordy served the Southern District of Alabama as a U.S. Deputy Marshal from 1936 through 1952, having been appointed a full U.S. Marshal for only a brief 3 years of that time.
Well, holy cow! Big props to all the women in the past paving the way for female officers today. And to all the women today who choose to serve. We know you don't have it easy, ladies. You go, girls! Well, thank you, Sharon, for giving us a brief history of women in the U.S. law enforcement.
It's no problem, Madison. Always happy to be here.
And thank you guys for listening to our little bonus feature of Madison's Mad Facts. And get ready for new episodes of Madison on the Air to premiere the first of every month.